There are so many times I say, I don't know what I'm going to talk about. I know you're getting sick of hearing me say that. But things always come up at the last minute, in the last half a day, day and a half, that something comes into my consciousness that seems worthy of investigation or just sharing and talking about. And um, I always like to uplift women in the Dharma, and this woman, Sharon Salzberg, has been uplifted in the Dharma for a very long time. But and she's like the grandmother, heart and soul of the Brahma Viharas, of the Metta practice, especially, and compassion practice. Um, One of those first Western seekers in the 60s and 70s who went to India and came back and became one of some founding members of Insight Meditation Society in Barre, Massachusetts. And she has written a lot of books. Her one on loving kindness is sort of like the Bible of the loving kindness world. But she recently had one out. It was just a couple of years ago, I think, in the summer. And I saw her um, interviewed on Zoom throughout the pandemic after this book, because the book is called Real Change, and it's mindfulness to heal ourselves and the world. And I think for those of us who have some care about how to act in the world when things are so challenging, there are so many emotional ups and downs, there's so much that's been affected, in by trauma of COVID-19. And sometimes once we've awakened to an issue or a cause and we take some action, how do we sustain our response over time? And I heard this a lot online in the morning, sitting sometimes from people who were in the healthcare field, getting burned out in COVID, trying to help others and taking action and needing to go to work. And it's just that there's trauma and disappointment and exhaustion, and it saturates our emotional lives and our identities sometimes and our beliefs. Um, she mentions in one of the interviews that I was listening to, um, I'm not sure how long ago it was, but she mentioned someone named May Kukiel, who was a faculty member at the Garrison Institute Wellness Program in New York. And Sharon was with her there. And May was pointing out how we might carry and communicate these effects bodily in our posture and our facial expressions and our overall body senses. And during one of the programs that they offered, she offered these together. They offered tools of meditation and yoga, and it was to domestic violence shelter workers. And May led an exercise to explore the somatic phenomenon that she adapted from a workbook that was called Transforming the Pain, a workbook on vicarious traumatization. And it was published like in 1996. But in the exercise, people worked in pairs. And May read this script out loud. There was person A and person B. And person A, and then later person B, sculpted their bodies into postures or positions that best expressed their response to the reading. And so May's script detailed a typical day for people who work at shelters. With a few adaptations, it could easily apply to other stressful and demanding environments. And so this is the script that she read. The phone rings. It is the district supervisor saying the budget you submitted has not been approved. You have to find more places to cut without disrupting essential services. Your office mate has become belligerent and is too communicative. A crisis has erupted between two residents who are frustrated, stressed, and nearly hopeless. And on a personal note, your health insurance company, having assured you they had all the paperwork they needed to process your claim, writes to tell you they don't have all the paperwork. The doctor's office says they sent it. The company says that they never received it. What more can you do? And on it went. The participants listened to the vignette and they took a moment to settle into their feelings. And then they used their bodies to convey their reactions. Posture, facial expressions, eyes, full body response. Once they found the right manifestation of the reaction, then they were asked to freeze for a moment or two and then allow themselves to really feel their pose. Time and time again, Sharon said that she looked over the room of people, curled over, trying to push away what they were hearing and feeling, with arms spread, muscles rigid, eyes squeezed shut, or holding themselves as though they could ward off the pain and keep from fragmenting, not breathing, and not ready to hear one more thing. It was so honest and so powerful and so sad. She mentioned that she couldn't help but think, what if we were all walking around this way? As literal representations of how we're hurting or simply so very tired within. A symbolic exercise maybe, but also very real. As the exercise of working with vicarious trauma continued, the person who had not molded themselves to that mood brought up by the script would look at their knotted up partner and gently begin to unwind them. Clenched fists were invited open. Hands that blocked seeing or hearing would instead start signaling an embrace. And between these gentle urgings and self-guided movement, she could see people uncoiling out of that fetal position and standing in a form that was empowered and calm and whole. Their posture began to convey balance, honor, a groundedness, and dignity. And the newly unfurled person was then asked to form a body memory of the new open posture and to consider using it in the future whenever strength or hope was needed. And we look at our habitual reactions to pain and consider whether they still serve us well, even if they once did. If those reactions are rejecting and denying or trying to not feel anything and sort of soldier through, maybe the more useful suggestion is acting them out in this kind of body sculpture to see if that's the posture that you want to maintain in your life. Then unfurling and open, feel the greater balance in your stance and honor your body's innate knowledge of how to wobble in coming to balance, if that's what happens, and breathing deeply. Just remembering, we can remember resilience just demands that we respond to this moment for this moment. It's not the same as long-term self-improvement. We open to what is, and we let go of those add-ons we've conditioned to pile on, and not to be afraid of what we're feeling. One way or another, we need to process the tension, either as a horrible experience or as something we can open up to. I've been reminded of this lately just from back and hip pain that I have. It's not as traumatic as what she's talking about with shelter workers, but just noticing the habit patterns that I have around holding my body a certain way, where I'm kind of scrunched forward and my hip is kind of limping, and I have this tension in the body that starts tightening, and it takes me a while to go, all right, this is not really serving me well. This is an old habit pattern that tightens up around, muscles in this body when certain movements happen. But if I stop in that moment and just even unfurl myself for a few seconds, it can happen fairly quickly where I'll say, okay, just unfurl and open up to that. Don't grasp onto it. Take a newer, broader stance, and I can find my posture straighten up, and I can find myself walking forward without so quickly going into that, immediate response. There's a storyteller, Joel Daniels, who's an activist, and he talks a little bit about being present with pain. He said, it comes down to my trying to come back to my body. Am I sitting up straight? Am I breathing? Am I breathing shallowly? The more I've done this, the easier it's become to catch myself when I've gone off. No one is always present. We can take small steps toward a different relationship to what is by reaching out sometimes to someone or allowing someone to reach out to us, creating with words or images or food or the way we pay attention to strangers or a new way of relating to our body or maybe a different way of relating to people that we work with. Listening, just taking one small step toward the unknown, toward acting without depending on immediate results. And so thereby relying on a different sense of meaning. Some things just hurt, and no matter what, we're not alone. Just taking one small step to allow whatever helping hands are coming toward us to reach to us, to extend a helping hand, and to do the same in return, to extend that helping hand to someone else in some way. Rainer Maria Rilke wrote, "So you must not be frightened. If a sadness rises up before you, larger than any you have ever seen, if a restiveness like light and cloud shadows passes over your hands and over all you do," I had to look up the word restiveness. Restiveness actually means impatience, uneasiness, or fidgety. I thought restive sounds like it could be something restful, but it is not. Restive means impatience, fidgety. You must think that something is happening with you, that life has not forgotten you, that it holds you in its hand. It will not let you fall. So I'm going to say that quote again from Rilke. So you must not be frightened if a sadness rises up before you, larger than any you have ever seen. If a restiveness like light and cloud shadows passes over your hands and over all you do, you must think that something is happening with you, that life has not forgotten you, that it holds you in its hand and it will not let you fall. Sharon mentioned in that article that when she's in some kind of pain, and she's found that this can be one of the worst components of what her experience is, feeling that she's all alone, and that like her nose is pressed up against the glass window looking into space where everyone else is gathered, and to enjoy a moment of comfort with one another and to be a part of life, and she feels excluded and like she's unaccounted for, and that no one's ever going to notice that she's outside. And it's the worst and most habitual add-on, as she calls them, to her conditioning that arises. And she said that she's been experiencing since childhood that when the habit of feeling different and excluded got acculturated, and working with it ever since college, that when in her Asian philosophy class, that habitual reaction was actually challenged. When she heard the Buddha's statement that there is suffering in life. You know, the subtext was, it's not just you. You're not weird and different and totally cast aside. You're just hurting. And as we come to see, even in the worst of circumstances, that life hasn't forgotten us, no matter how despairing or cut off we can sometimes feel at any given time, we're not actually severed from the essential flow of life or from one another. And if we get quiet for a while and pay careful attention, this is what we realize. There was another Zen teacher who was also reporting, because he's a therapist and lives in New York, goes to New York Zen Center for Contemplative Care. And he was in, he led Zoom rooms during COVID, and he would have people that were trained physicians and nurses working at the epicenter of the coronavirus in New York City. And they would step into a room somewhere and join his meditation times. And he had some things to say about connecting with each other authentically when we have no other choice except through screens, you know, like we do on Zoom, as we were talking about in the beginning. It's given us some great ways of connecting with people that we never would have had any other way. And that how important it is to seek out spaces where we gather and share. And, you know, that's a source of our resilience during these times that just seem to be stringing along and along and along. You know, that idea of new normal is sort of like, that's not really such a thing. It's just more like a new world. We're creating a new way of connecting with each other in ways that are different than it used to be. This one Rinzai monk that Koshin was also mentioning, in the midst of the pandemic, he started creating videos that reimagine traditional Zen, the traditional Zen heart chant. And I looked him up in YouTube, and I found him just with his guitar on stage with some other people, but he's a monk, and they're all, and he has this beautiful chant of the Heart Sutra. And it was a large Asian audience, and they were all chanting it along with him. And then I saw what Koshi was referring to. I went to newer videos of his, and during these, really difficult times of so much trauma around us, he made these chants with mountain streams, and he and other monks walking very mindfully. If I can find it again, I'll play it for you just to have a little idea of it. Because, we still have to have ways of experiencing joy and creativity in times of difficulty. And that monk singing the Heart Sutra with these beautiful backgrounds of mountains and streams is very relaxing when these times are challenging for us. I mean, it's not just, we shouldn't be bypassing our sadness, but we also allow ourselves to have more, that what sometimes can be considered wholeheartedness is, in time of grief, of this immense loss of everything that we thought we knew and how things have changed, and how we move through our grief and wake up with our grief into this life at this moment, unfurling ourselves from those tight balls. And I think you might have been doing the same thing I've been doing over the last couple of years, of really saying, what do I really value? And what am I doing with my life? And what and who do I care about? And we have this opportunity to address important issues with family members and friends, and conversations so that we can tell people that we love them and how we love them in particular. We can have kindness toward strangers, and this is a really powerful mirror. The mirror that we sort of move really close and we respond to that reflection is an opportunity. And in the Theravadan tradition, there's the Heart Sutra of the loving kindness, the Metta Sutta. And in Sanskrit, Thich Nhat Hanh has a version of the Heart Sutra. I think I might be able to open this up. Let me see. I'm going to try to find it. See if this is the right one. Well, it is not. My Wi-Fi is not seeming to want to download it. Let me try again. Well, I'll give it time to see if it's going to. One more option here. No, it's not going anywhere. It's just spinning, so must be my Wi-Fi connection is not happy with my location. So we'll see if it comes up slowly, letting it find its way through the ethers. So I think mostly my point in all this is being with grief, being with discomfort, being with things that arise that we're uncomfortable with. Just even naming it sometimes can be helpful. And, how are we experiencing grief these days, and allowing pause to really let others know, and that you want to know what they're going to say, and just pausing. It's a kind of generosity that we can develop, and coming back to the softness of our bellies and starting again. That there's sometimes the traumatic part of this is when we don't take time to actually recognize what we're feeling. And when we don't talk about it and isolate emotionally within it. But it also means we allow ourselves to unfurl. We face what's happening. We allow ourselves to unfurl. And we can find those moments of joy in kindness to ourselves and in kindness to others. So I think I'll open that up for a little conversation for now, and just thank you for listening to the Dhamma. How can we feel our own suffering and really stay connected? That's the real healing power of understanding that there's resilience and we're never truly alone. And we can love ourselves with kindness and compassion and share that with others. So I'll stop there and I'll see if my Wi-Fi changes.